Oh, it's getting hot. The economic war between Russia and the West, this after President Biden banned Russian oil imports. The goal of this, and sanctions, of course, is to cripple Russia's economy and force Vladimir Putin into stopping the war in Ukraine.
Could it backfire on us? Gas prices shooting up. It's going to have a ripple effect throughout the economy. Could we be moving into a recession? Milton Ezrati, Chief Economist, Invested, also author of the book 30 Tomorrows, the next 3 decades of globalization, demographics, and how we will live. Thanks for being here. So I saw a headline today, war fallout, U.S. economy to slow, Europe risks recession, Russia to suffer double-digit declines. But what's to say that we don't also see the R word here?
We could. I think the pressure is not so much this last gesture of cutting off Russian oil imports. They're very small for the United States, but we have effectively pushed Russian oil off world markets. I know there's a carve out within SWIFT for them to continue to sell oil. That's being done for Europe's sake, not ours. But the Russian oil is not moving. The carriers will not carry it. The insurers will not insure it. So it is as if the world has banned Russian oil. This is going to go harder on Europe than us, but if the world goes into recession, we will. There's also the chance that the Federal Reserve is going to start raising rates to deal with the inflation, and that also contributes to recessionary pressures.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, does the Fed now find itself in a bind because before this war in Ukraine, as you know, and as they said, they were intending to raise interest rates because of inflation that was brought about by a resurgence of trade, I suppose, after the pandemic started to wane, at least in the western part of the world. But now that we've got this war going on, might their solution to one problem cause a different one?
Well, yes, it's a very a tightrope the Fed has to walk here. They can't not act because the inflation was more fundamental than just the war. If it was just the war, they could say we're going to weather this thing until we get Putin to back down and so forth. But the inflation was much more fundamental. It was even more fundamental than supply chains because we have printed enough money to float an entire navy. So there was this pressure. The Fed has to deal with this, but if they go too fast, they're going to precipitate a recession. So they're walking a very fine line here. They're going to make their first announcements later this month. We'll see how they're handling it. They could easily screw up.
Does it help that we still have, they could easily screw up. Does it help that we still have some post-pandemic yearning to spend, at least among some people? But then again, if you can't afford anything or you can't find something, then it doesn't matter if you want to spend your money.
Well, I think the supply chain problems, except for this oil issue with the war, the supply chain problems were beginning to dissipate. So the idea of finding what you wanted was becoming less of a problem. But as I said, the inflation was there before we did anything with this, fighting with our sanctions, and the Fed will have to act in some way to quell that. Otherwise, it's going to get built into the economy, and we're going to have a lot more trouble in the long run. As far as the recession is concerned, I don't think we are facing anything imminent in this respect, even with the cutoff in oil. Because there is some of this momentum in the economy, this post-pandemic recovery. Yes, a lot of the money has been eaten up by inflation, but I think that'll carry us through to the end of the year and into 2023. But after that, a lot depends on the Fed and a lot depends on how soon we can resolve this situation in Europe.
You know, Mike and I were chuckling, you may have heard, when you sort of said that the Fed could screw it up. And that actually leads to the question, you know, people tend to think that these people at the Federal Reserve, that they're all these sort of, I don't know, geniuses, and they know exactly what to do to steer the country. But historically, as you know, the Fed has often screwed things up. So how could we be confident that these people really know what they're doing?
We can't.
That's very comforting.
They're some of the best in the world, and I'm not taking away from them, but there's only so much that can be done. And the Fed, if it moves too slowly, the inflation gets embedded in the economy. If it moves too fast, it precipitates a recession. So it's like breaking on ice. Of course, you're in L.A., you don't know much about that. It's like breaking on ice. You press too hard, and you skid out of control. You press too softly, and you don't stop. So the Fed has a very difficult job here. They may be the best in the world. They're better than I am, but that doesn't mean that they can't screw up. They have in the past.
We just crossing our fingers here and hoping for the best, which is what we always do, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, at least Jay Powell is aware of the problem. 3 months ago, he wasn't. So that's encouraging.
All right. Milton Ezrati, Chief Economist at Vested, also author of the book 30 Tomorrows, Next 3 Decades of Globalization, Demographics, and How We Will